Jim Joyce. Notice my
Hey.
different voice with Jim Joyce.
You're working on it. You got it.
There's only one news as far as I'm concerned. Congrats.
Thanks, man. I assume you're talking about the
the big announcement. I'll let you speak to it.
So I guess what is it? Tuesday morning at 7:30 in Ireland, Health Beacon, my company that we've talked about, has announced announced our intention to float on the Euronext Growth Dublin. So over the next couple, So over the next couple of weeks, we'll look to raise 25 million euros and kind of finish off that round. So super exciting, super exciting. It's daunting, but exciting.
Man, I know I've kind of talked about this, and I'm just, proud to be a friend of knowing you from that first little PDF in London that you showed me of this beautiful device. And now you have an intent to float on a stock exchange and become a publicly traded company CEO. Are you going to be able to hang out with me on this Wednesday show? I don't know. We'll have to figure that out.
Yeah, like the hair and makeup will come in.
Yeah, exactly.
Of course, man. Of course.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So speaking of investments and trading, we are going to invite Charlie Hartwell is going to join us now.
Excellent.
So the background on Charlie. Good morning, Charlie.
Might help if I get my video on.
We're getting there. It's evening for us, so we had a lot of practice already. It's still somewhat of a morning for you, right? Ish.
It is. Good morning.
Good morning, Charlie. Nice to meet you.
Jim,
nice to
Charlie,
meet you.
Charlie, Jim.
Good to connect with you.
As you were coming on, I think I even commented that to you over email, because we were relatively recently introduced, kind of within the last year or so, by our mutual friend Ofer from Happify. But I don't know. I feel like after the first conversations, I felt like I've known you forever. So you're just a personable guy. But anyway, welcome to The Shot. Thanks for making the time. And for our millions of listeners and viewers, we'd love to get to know Charlie and sort of your career path to becoming now a VC.
Oh, we lost your voice.
Yeah, we lost you. So can you hear me? Now we can. Yes.
Perfectly.
Okay. So I've had a non-traditional career path. My first job, I was working on Wall Street managing trust and estate investments during the day and starting a nonprofit in the slums of Nairobi at night. And my career's kind of gone like that. I've worked in 14 different industries. I've worked in corporate America, startup, turnaround, nonprofit, for-profit, domestic, international. I have done, sort of the traditional I've worked for H.J. Heinz as a consumer goods marketer and for Pillsbury. But then my next job, I was running a company helping two female explorers cross the continent of Antarctica. And we turned that company into and the expedition into a metaphor of if these two women can cross the continent of Antarctica, 1,700 miles pulling 250-pound sleds for 90 days, then what can you do with your life? So
good question.
I'm already feeling like I haven't done anything with my life after the 2-minute introduction.
So I've just had this, my career makes no sense unless you sort of put the essence of everything that I've been involved with has to do with growth, transformation, innovation, and authentic leadership. And that sort of ties it all together. But I'm really in my sweet spot when I'm helping to build global movements. And the work that I'm doing now for the Bridge Builders Collaborative is kind of the latest manifestation of that.
Okay.
We'll get to that, but it's interesting, right? So first of all, can you talk a little bit more about kind of what you were doing in those 90 days with those two amazing women?
Yeah, so in 1998, I met the first woman who'd ever skied to the North Pole, a woman named Anne Bancroft. And she'd also been the first woman to reach the South Pole. And she wanted to be the first woman to cross the continent of Antarctica. And so she'd always operated under a nonprofit model, going around to schools begging for money for these really expensive expeditions. And for some reason, when I met her, it was really an emotional professional moment for me, like a business plan. I knew nothing about expeditions, but a business plan sort of popped into my head. I think she thought I was a little crazy. I was like faxing her business plans within like, a day after meeting her for lunch. But I didn't know it at the time, but I put together the first for-profit expedition company in US history, because I thought if you want to do something this big, we have to do it as a for-profit. And as opposed to going to schools, and doing fundraisers, we went to people like Volvo and Motorola and Apple Computer and Pfizer, Women's Health, and major brands, and created a massive global event generating 3 billion media impressions. And my goal really was, to support these women, to do that, and then put the team together to take their message and create this sort of global movement to inspire other girls and women and boys. And so we did that through, we had 3 million school kids following a curriculum we developed in 65 countries. And it was just during the time when, if you remember back to the Gore Bush election, there was nothing else on CNN except our story. That was the only other story at the time that was making it on CNN.
I feel like I've heard. I feel like I'd have to date myself going back, but I feel like I've seen this and I've heard the name Anne Bancroft before, and that's amazing. And is a company still running? I don't know you
too. I was watching some cartoons still.
Right. I was a very sophisticated 8-year-old.
Yeah.
But was is that company still running?
No, it was. I worked. I was a CEO for 7 years, okay. And we sort of accomplished our mission, and and things sort of ended, 7 years later.
And what's the pitch like? So what's the pitch like when you're going into Volvo and saying, "Hey, would you back?" I have 2 people they want to cross Antarctica, and you get 10 grand for me. What's that pitch like?
It was more like $1 million. And so we went in at the time, we were competing against things like, Major League Baseball and the Olympics or whatever. We went in with, a passionate connection, a way of connecting to women. And then we customized each sponsorship, for Volvo, it was all about safety. How do you do this dangerous journey and create something about safety, and how do you inspire women? And it was interesting because at the time women's sports were not what they are today. The WNBA was just starting. The U.S. women's hockey team had just won the gold medal, so there wasn't a lot of sponsorship dollars. And Anne and Lee are these incredible women. Anne is lesbian, so going in and pitching, in 1998. Going and pitching a famous figure who was not straight. That was another challenge, and it took a long time, and it took to get people. But I'll never forget sitting at the vice president of marketing at Apple, and I was pitching him, and Anne was in the room, and it was the one time he just said, "I want you to shut up, and I want to hear from her." And so he asked her about what she wanted to do at the expedition. And as soon as she got done, he said, "Okay, we'll do whatever you want. We're not going to sponsor you. We're not going to give you money, but we'll give you whatever promotion, whatever technical equipment." And, that was a pretty amazing turning point. for us when they were really the first people that signed on.
Right.
And it's interesting as you're talking about, and then as you talked about your career, sort of going into household brand names, more at a physical level. And I was just, kind of as you were talking, reminding myself of the Bridge Builders portfolio, because it's literally kind of who's who of the modern consumer, right? And I'm just gonna blurt out some of them, but like Insight Timer, 10% Happier, Headspace, Happify, Santa Health. Richard, was just an amazing guy, right? So I think like it's interesting how you were sort of developing, early on things that were not seen by people, to your point, and then early investments into some of these companies. How do you see kind of your, maybe I'm putting words into your mouth, but maybe a little bit love of a consumer / marketing and moving from physical goods to, I guess, digital goods that help people?
Oh my gosh, nobody's ever asked me that question. I love it. I never really, I thought of it more, less from a product perspective, as opposed to, I think of brands as being, helping people to connect to something. And, in the physical brand space, you try to bring some emotion to a consumer product. And we were really early in sort of saying, in the whole person, I'm going to call it sort of the whole person wellness space. We were some of the first to see that the physical fitness industry, which had really developed the same way that mental fitness has developed, science, entrepreneurs, scale, the same thing was needed, in the mental health space. And so the only way we were going to bring meditation, which is a very Eastern concept, and at the time people thought it was woo-woo and whatever, but the only way to bring it to the Western world was through modern branding. And so we found companies that could do that. And we found companies that could engage with people and talk to them at the level they were at. And, I just think that's kind of what branding is all about, is making that connection.
And when you think about those brands, like what's, what when your thesis coming in and either kind of guiding people or making choices about which brands to back, how do you think about that, or how do you coach them down? Because there isn't a lot of history of people building brands in mental wellness.
Are you making Charlie pick his favorites in the portfolio now? Is that...
Are you what? Sorry, I missed that.
Did you miss Jim's question or my comment, or both?
Your comment.
I was saying, are you making Charlie pick your favorites out of the portfolio with that question?
I have lots of favorites.
Yeah.
So, I think, Jim, I'm not sure I'm going to answer your question, but what we tried to find really was leaders that had concepts that we thought would become, had some science behind them, and that we thought that the team was such that they could bring a concept to scale, and they knew how to scale things. And then we didn't exactly know how they were going to do it. And we watched a lot of people, Eugene, you were just talking about all these companies, and, the path from like consumer to business, to B2B to healthcare, and how that all interacts. We didn't necessarily know where the path was going to take us. You just try to find people that you want to be on the path with.
Got it. So it's not it's not a constructed brand like in you or an H.J. Heinz, and you're thinking about a new product and you go through this brand process. You were good leaders, good products. You wanted to work with them, had evidence to back up their technology. And
Charlie, you're spending some time. You've been around the block, and Jim here just made we'll let you in, made an announcement that there's an intent to float on the Irish stock market for his company, and same thing. So just again, kudos, man, Jim. But the reason I bring it up is your comment around, as long as there's a clear vision and an execution team behind it, how you get, and sometimes you need to take us 2 steps back to push forward, or sideways, or I actually don't like using the term pivot, right? It's just discovering new insights and you sort of lean into those insights. That's I don't know. I'm not a big fan of pivot as a word, but
well, I'm going to use pivot because I do like the word. What I like is to find curious entrepreneurs who say, I am really clear about my mission. I'm really clear about where I'm starting. And I'm curious as to listen to the market and tell me where it needs to go. And, you know, in our space, I take Headspace for an example, probably, you know, one of the best known brands that's developed in the mental health space. You know, they did a great job of marketing to consumers. And because they marketed well to consumers, it allowed them, you know, people start asking about whether they could bring it into businesses. The same thing with Happify, Eugene, which is where we connected. It's like they had 2 million downloads, and then companies started calling them. And so they had to take a look at that, and they were curious enough to say, wow, how do we respond to these calls? And then they learned how challenging, you know, how different B2B marketing is, how different sales cycles are, et cetera. But they just remained open and curious, and they found the right people to answer questions for them at the right time that had expertise that was greater than them, than the founders.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting, some of the names that I listed, and let's just kind of stick, you know, Headspace, 10% Happier, Happify, you know, Insight Timer, right? To a certain extent, it's very hard to find investors that would invest in multiple companies that are in a very close space, right? And I think probably Bridge Builders is one of the few that I've seen that actually has done this, right, with a thesis. How do you manage that, right, as an individual, as a potential board observer, right? Because you want all your, for lack of a better term, babies to succeed, right? But there's competition as well.
Yeah, I found that there hasn't been as much competition. We have companies that I would say are sometimes closely related. They're not perfectly overlined. Right. And in a growing market, I'd say it's much, there's a lot of green space. There's also a lot of space, you know, for the challenge isn't when we make the investment. The challenge is what happens after the investment, because a lot of times, you know, somebody will graduate to a different model, and that will be more competitive to another model. But the way that I try to, you know, to manage it is that I will never reveal anything confidential about one company to another, and they know it because I never on a call. They know that I don't reveal stuff about other people to them, so they know that I'm not going to do it about them. I only talk about things that are publicly available, and I also think that, you know, we have a little bit different view on competition, in the sense that competition, yes, there can be competition and people can get all worried about it, but there's also the potential for cooperation. And as you're building a new field in a new industry, there are plenty of opportunities for folks to collaborate with each other. And so I haven't, if you have really good boundaries, I haven't found it to be an issue, except I'm always really honest about it with our, you know, with our entrepreneurs. So it's not like they know, it's not like it's news to them that we invest in things close to them.
Right.
And as well, because we've made so many investments in the space, we can add a lot of value to people's thinking because we know the space, you know, better than most people.
When you think about, Charlie, with the consumer, like the role that the consumer is playing in, you know, in these types of applications, and, you know, but and how important they are in kind of vetting the technology, showing there's demand for it, probably perfecting the tech, you know, getting, and then these organizations turn around and say, okay, we got good tech, and now we want to go to the business, you know, the enterprise selling side of the organization. Like, in your mind, what, like, you know, you hear two schools of thoughts, like really hard for a small organization to do both of those things, you know, and then a lot of companies within healthcare are trying to do both of it. What's your kind of advice or insights when you look at that challenge?
Well, we've
asking for a friend, aren't you?
Yeah. I'm trying to do it. I'm trying to do that right now.
I'll just say our experience, Jim, is more on consumer going to B2B than B2B going to consumer.
Okay.
And, it's a little bit easier for consumer because if you have consumer traction, you can continue to have a consumer business. But when you go to pitch, the organizations, they actually like that it's a consumer app. They want to deliver something that was built for consumers, because what they really want is engagement. And if they have an app that was just built for B2B, a lot of times the engagement's not as good as it is for consumers. So I've seen that, several times, where I appreciate that the consumer really helps these companies to learn how to deliver something that's sticky, that makes a difference in people's lives, and that just naturally graduates to opportunities and deeper along the healthcare scale. Or
I think about it, like what I struggle with a little bit is it's like the business dynamic feels pretty natural in some ways, consumer going into that, seeing engagement, having the data. But it's almost like, how do you design the organization to be able to tackle both of those? Like that's what you struggle, meaning, people that are going to try to pierce an insurance industry or employers or pharma or whatever your go to market strategy is, or help clinicians. And then, versus people that kind of are experts in how do I, distantly in some ways market to consumers through traditional advertising or channels. Like it just seems like seems like a lot, for one organization to figure out.
Yeah, it's a lot. And normally what I'll say is that as people make those changes or pivots, they have to add people who are specifically focused on markets and who specifically know how to best take the insights from the consumer market and deliver it to to businesses. It is a very different skill.
It's interesting, right? Like just in the Your Coach example, we've initially kind of focused on the supply side for the coaches, and then realized people are just downloading. At first, we were just saying no, right? Just kind of, we're for coaches initially to work on it, and then we very much realized that sort of waiting list and the consumers actually gave us the data. As far as we knew that 43% are looking for health coaching and mental health space. And so our clients ultimately for the B2B, we came with a lot of this, de-identified kind of more global say, hey, so I think to me, it's that consumer first is sort of interesting, right? And I think, Jim, you going the reverse in a way, right? You were going B2B and now sort of exploring the D2C model through partnerships, right?
Yeah, like I wonder, I kind of wonder how, like, if that's just going to be, some version. Obviously, we have our own unique story, but of why we're doing it that way. But it's actually so important that you develop a direct relationship with the consumer if you're launching digital health technologies, right? It's not a nice to have; it's a critical to have thing where you're probably not going to survive if you just have enterprise level, engagement or software. So it feels like digital health tech entrepreneurs or companies or, company builders aren't going to have a choice. They're going to have to learn how to bridge both these systems, And
in healthcare, and let's touch on another portfolio company, which it's, B2B to patient, right, through a prescription. So, and I'm referring to Pear Therapeutics, and I'm a big fan of Corey and the team. I know with their SPAC, they got a lot of slack, just from everything from revenues to valuations, and the ratio of that. And of course, there's always going to be naysayers, right? In sort of the big vision of a bold entrepreneur. Curious on kind of what attracted you to invest to begin with, and how you're looking at that market, because it's not B2C. It's not, I don't have to tell you guys and our listeners, pretty familiar, I think.
Yeah. So, when we first met Corey, probably 8 years ago, and we were really one of the first outside investors, if not the first outside investor in the company. And we like to invest in revolutions, and Corey was he was very steeped into this space, so he knew the space he was entering, and then he knew the challenges as well of what it was going to take to get software through the FDA. And and what's interesting, coming back to this consumer piece, is so much of digital therapeutics, let's just take Pear for an example. The FDA's approved 3 of their products. Once you do that, now you've got to convince insurance companies and payers and and benefit folks to put it, to list it and put a code behind it, et cetera. But then you've got to convince doctors to prescribe it, and then consume. And at the end of the day, consumers have got to like it, and that's where I think it's going to be really interesting when you translate what Pear has done. The research behind what they've done, it's been really good. It's gotten through a lot of barriers, and now really over a period of time, it's like, wow, okay, so how do people use this? And just like drugs, like, are they gonna use it daily if they're prescribed, and are they gonna like it? And if they don't like it, then they're not going to use it. So while Corey and Pear was never a consumer product, they actually have to go the other way and make sure always that they're learning about the user experience, because efficacy can be great, but if nobody's using it, then there's no efficacy.
Yeah, and I think they just got a day or 2 ago FDA breakthrough, I think, for alcohol, right? Alcohol
Correct.
Use disorder. Okay.
Correct.
Yeah.
No, I mean, his I could totally, I remember him just going to JP Morgan and hearing his presentation. I was just in the audience, and I still remember that presentation. Like, I'm always impressed that, that was, I don't know how many years ago. It was a lot of years ago. And the vision of what he was trying to do and how he was applying, the pharmaceutical industry processes to bringing products to market and bringing it in. And at the time, while we all talk about that right now in the digital health space, that was kind of completely new, fresh thinking. And it just sat there. I remember the moment going through like the clarity, very investable fellow, very clear thinking.
I loved your comment that you guys invest in revolutions, right? So what's the next revolution here? What are we looking at here? Give us a little crystal ball.
Putting it into my wife's wisdom, she said to me 3 years ago, Charlie, you've been investing in the gateway drugs to higher levels of consciousness. And she said, it's time to go deeper. And, we can point to 100 million people meditating on apps that we've invested in. We can point to, the first three of the first 4 FDA approved software. We've a lot of milestones, but where we want to go from here is to really develop models or support models that get much deeper into sort of conscious evolution, whole person healing, because there's a concern that if humanity doesn't expand its consciousness, we're not going to have a planet to live on. Our technology has actually been developed at a much faster rate than our consciousness, and so we're literally destroying the planet that we live on. And if we don't wake up to that, and we don't and we don't improve our mental health and really get more connected to ourselves, more connected to the earth, more connected to other people, then we're going to face a really uncertain future. So what we're looking for, Eugene, at the moment are sort of deeper models of sort of consciousness and deeper models of healing. So if you look at our current healing model, it's really based on something that it's kind of a saviorism model. It's a pill or a doctor or something outside of myself is going to fix me, and that means that you need to be fixed. We would like to change it to where it's like a model where we're really valuing healing as opposed to selling more. We're really valuing deeper connection, and we're really helping to support people really being more responsible for their own well-being, and to get to deeper levels of sort of mental health where we're getting to the root cause of trauma versus just like talking about the trauma. And so we're kind of out there again, I would say, which is what we were 10 years ago when we started this, looking at sort of what's the next frontiers of things like, music as healing, sound healing. How do communities actually facilitate healing? How do we develop more social connection in general? And how do we really help to support people to sort of wake up to whatever their purpose is? Because I believe we all have a purpose that we're here, and then to live that, whatever that is. Because I think we're meant to be here and to live in joy. And if we're not, then let's dig into why we're not, because that's what we're meant to do here.
And kind of on the heels of that thesis, I know I just connected you. Sorry, Jim.
I was saying it was a beautiful sentiment. I'm just giving a
Thanks.
I was also in my deep thoughts, so I wasn't even looking at the screen. I was just mesmerized by the thesis. But I know on the heels of that thesis, I just made an introduction to just Piano Health, Oskar, to you, Charlie, but literally the same day, I think you guys made an announcement on a company you guys invested in, right? I think it was music, and if I'm not mistaken, some psilocybin or maybe you can talk about it more deeper.
Yeah, so it's a European company called Wavepaths. The founders in Portugal, the company's in the UK. And Wavepaths was developed by a guy named Mendel Kaelin, who's probably the leading researcher on music as it relates to psychedelics. And they've developed a musical platform that research is proving can help not only in the short term, I think it can help prove that it can improve the efficacy of psilocybin-assisted therapy and actually customize the experience for the user. But over a period of time, what if music itself is a healing tool, and what if music itself can be approved as a drug? Maybe we don't need psychedelics. Maybe we need psychedelics once for a really big trauma. It's very expensive to go through that, but what if music can bring us back to that state that we were in? What's interesting about this is, so what if music can be used, in group settings or with a therapist as a way of helping you to fulfill whatever intention you have. If it's about healing, that's one thing. If it's about insight, that's another thing. So it's an early stage company, but I think it's again sort of out there on that more revolutionary scale.
When you think, like, just digging in, because we know quite, Eugene and I, and I'm sure you do as well, Charlie, like we know lots of, quite a few of the music, kind of digital health entrepreneurs and people that have come out in that space. Like, what do you think that looks like? Like I'm just thinking about, like, what's the future look like? If we reached out 5 years from now, are you going to a music therapist? Are you downloading an application? Is it kind of mainstream? It's, as I go in to see my general practitioner and he says, geez, Jim, you sound pretty stressed. You might want to, here's a Grateful Dead CD or something, not CD, like download, like, what is that? How does that, what do you think happens here? Like, does that go mainstream? Does it stay in this technology space, or what do you think?
Well, I actually think it can come into the medical space. And I think that we can, one of the things Wavepaths is doing is getting to where I think music will be able to be customized to your current state. So through measurement of, where you are, you can be developed, you can have something sort of custom fed to support an intention wherever you're at. And that would be different. That would be a different musical experience based on sort of where you're at. So if you're really stressed, you get fed one thing. If you're really joyous, you get fed another. and I believe that over a period of time, these kind of things will be proven to be beneficial. As another example, there's work being done now in in several research labs around music, like just with psychedelic therapy. How does music itself change the psychedelic therapeutic experience, and can it improve outcomes? And if you can custom make something that's going to improve an outcome, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I was just as you're saying, I was thinking about it with like medicines, like the prescription of the medicine, that it's fundamentally, its regulation sits in this kind of first do no harm philosophy, right? Like you study the medication, everything's about like the first phase of clinical trials is like does it actually kill people? Does it hurt people? And then okay, we have a medication that can survive animals, and now it can survive humans, and then we look at its efficacy, but it's all based on this kind of safety parameter, right? And like things like music or some of the stuff we're all working on, the safety risk isn't there. So as a result of the safety risk not being there, you don't need this apparatus of pharmacy and clinical systems, kind of dosing it, right? Like it's just like, if I took an extra, dose of whatever Shakira, I'm not at risk. Like
you'll be dancing all night, Jim. You'll be dancing all night.
Other than annoying everyone. You know what I'm saying? Like I wonder, like this, the absence of a safety risk means that the system, it can't like deal with it or something. I was just thinking in my own head as you were describing it.
I obviously don't think that the safety risk is I mean, there's little safety risk. I think that more of the work is going to be done on the efficacy,
Mm-hmm.
of can this music or light, or I mean, there's different types of technologies that can be supportive of this experience. VR is another one, where how can that experience support healing? And the entrepreneurs, if they have enough proof behind that, then they have a choice to go through sort of that FDA system as a way of saying, okay, this isn't just something that doctors can think about. This actually can be prescribed. This actually is proven to enhance a drug, or some other type of experience. It might be proven to just enhance an overall mental health therapy. Take 2 Talkspace and some music, and and just complement what a therapist already does.
There should be like a new administration, because even like the idea that would go through some, like just say the music without the medication component to it would go through FDA. There should be the FHA, the Federal Healing Administration. They should have a
Ooh, I like that, Jim.
Wow. Okay. Are you announcing a run for an office?
Because the Healing Administration should be dealing with that, and they should be looking at the efficacy, not comparing it to drugs.
Charlie, I haven't looked at, I think you have Health Rhythms. I know kind of in our network, we should actually have Brian and Owen from Med Rhythms, right? I mean, they just made some big announcements, and I think they're doing or trying to do exactly that, kind of like the efficacy of that music, the big deal that they had just recently with the funding. So it'd be interesting to kind of dive into this sort of prescribing music even deeper into on the shot here as we're drinking. Maybe I just have one other, kind of going back to the board observer and, being really a partner to startup founders, right? How do you look being, a board member and or board observer? I know they're different roles, but just, your approach and any advice to startups and entrepreneurs on kind of, I would say, not just managing, but really building, actually partnering with the board. Any kind of key takeaways from all your experiences?
So first of all, I came into this space. I'd never been sort of a venture capitalist before. So I come in at it from an entrepreneur's perspective, and someone who, has been coaching people for a long period of time. I'm just passionate about finding great entrepreneurs, and once we make a commitment to someone, our goal is to see them be successful and to use every tool that we can that's at our disposal to help them. So that might be like, Bridge Builders is a collaborative of 11 investors. They're all really, highly seasoned, highly connected people from different industries. We all have the same mission, but we're but they have such different experiences. How do we understand what does the entrepreneur need, and then make the connections or provide the advice or help them? And a lot of that is just listening, because we don't have a prescription. We try to listen, and then if you talk to our entrepreneurs, I think across the board, what they'd say is we're the number one, number two, number three value-added investor, regardless of what size investment we have, because we're so passionate about this field succeeding. And this is our field. We want to, we're here not just to make investments, we're here to shift things on the planet. And so we're not here to just be passively making investments and hoping to get some money out the other side. The fun part of it is actually helping. But each person needs things, they're all at different stages, and they need different things at different times.
Yeah, awesome.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. I mean, listen, we can, on any one of these points, we can keep digging deeper. But then, we're not, we don't have a Tim Ferriss show that lasts for 2.5, 3 hours, right? But Jim, do you want to go to your sort of favorite?
Yeah, I think we
last question.
We're yanking all kinds of advice out of you, Charlie, today. I feel like we got a good. This is the whole thing is our therapy session here. But if you imagine, if you imagine a young Charlie that has is created a phenomenal mental health application that can help people do expeditions across, that just informs them as a combination of music and mental health coaching and meditation, that they can, scale mountains and traverse terrains. You should come up with this phenomenal product, and you're bringing it into market, and you think you've got investment capital going forward. What advice would you give to that young Charlie embarking on that entrepreneurial adventure?
Well, with anything, with anything like that, I'd say, you don't do this alone. Collaboration is how you create change. And as an entrepreneur, it's not your job. It's your job to understand your mission, to find and connect to others who share that mission, and then to find the best team you can. Find people that are much more skilled than you are at every position in the company, but that they're passionate and mission aligned. And then just go see what you can create. Obviously set goals and all that sort of stuff, but it's really creating, enterprises is something that teams do. It's not, it's not just young Charlie. So my passion is for anything I've ever done and companies I've led is not about what do I know, it's who I brought to the team, and then what remarkable results that we've created together to help shift things on the planet.
Awesome.
Amazing. Love
Awesome.
it. Collaboration is how you create change. That's the takeaway for me.
Fantastic.
Charlie, thank you for making the time. And
this is fun, guys.
Happy Thanksgiving coming up tomorrow. I know, Jim, you and I, we don't feel as it's Thanksgiving, given the fact that we're on the other side of the pond.
I'm serving turkey if you want to come over to Dublin.
We got one. I'm in the kitchen and it's a bit of a mess, but I'll show you anyway. It's already you know what, it's fine. But there's a turkey that was being, prepared for tomorrow. So
that's great.
Happy Thanksgiving, Charlie. It's a pleasure meeting you.
Yeah, good to talk to you both.
Look forward to seeing it.
And Jim, nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
All right.
Take care.
See you. Bye.